Put it in the bin. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. So the hadith that we're covering today is from hadith number 16 of the 40 hadith of Imam An-Nawawi. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رجلا قال للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوصني قال لا تغضب فردد مرارا قال لا تغضب رواه البخاري. So in this hadith it's mentioned that a man came to the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم and said to him, advise me, seeking his advice. So the Messenger of Allah Azza wa Jal, he mentioned sallallahu alaihi wasallam la taghdab, and he mentions faraddada miraran. He continued to repeat this advice, la taghdab. He didn't just say it once, he said it a number of times. Of the benefits that we can take from this hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew about this person who was asking the question, and knew of the issues is that there was someone who can easily get angry, or that was someone who had problems with anger. So he advised him not to become angry. Now, this advice, la taghdab, don't get angry, don't be angry, it is advice of not only just not becoming angry, not being in a state of anger, but also avoiding everything that would lead to that state. Everything that can cause a person to become angry, you avoid that. So لا تغضب ولا يعني تقرب ما يحسلك إلى الغضب, and you stay away from that which will bring you towards becoming angry also. And what is mentioned, this person, they sought from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ a comprehensive advice regarding characteristics of goodness that they could preserve and act upon, out of fear that they would not be able to preserve had he had been advised with many different things. The fact he was advised with one particular matter that he could not hold on to made it easy for him to preserve this advice. And within this advice, you see that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was aware of the one who is asking him the question. That's something that's very important. When someone comes and seeks your advice, it's important you're aware of the circumstance of the one who is asking advice. That when you give advice, it's advice that's suitable and appropriate for that person. And you see many other examples of this within the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where you find a person asked about what were the best actions that they could do, what's the most beloved actions to Allah. In different narrations of the same question asked by different Sahaba, you find the answer is different, showing that the advice given was what was most befitting for the one who's questioning. For example, for one it was al-iman billah was salah fi waqtiha, belief in Allah and praying in its correct time. For another person it was belief in Allah and birr al-walidain, or being obedient to your parents. So showing that sometimes different people may ask the same question, however, what is given to them as advice may be different because of who they are, their background, their circumstance, what they're known for. This also shows us as well that fatwa shopping can be dangerous sometimes, because when you have a fatwa, many times the fatwa is according to the one who has asked the question. And sometimes it comes with a circumstance, the background behind the one who's asked the question, that perhaps you may have something similar but not the same. So that might not be applicable to you in totality. What was advised to that person may not be applicable to you. And also, when it comes to fatwa, you have to understand fatwa is not always binding. It's binding upon the one who asked the question, because they're seeking an Islamic ruling on a particular issue. But you cannot make it binding on everyone. I can't say, I went and asked the Sheikh about this, so you all have to do it as well. Because al-fatwa hukmun shar'i bighayri ilzam. It is an Islamic ruling, however, it is without compulsion. There's no compulsion. So it's important to understand when we ask a question to a Sheikh, that one, the Sheikh is asking your question, is answering your question. You asked, he's giving you an answer. And that answer is befitting to you as a person. Hence why when this person came to the Prophet Muhammad and asked for advice, the Prophet Muhammad said, don't be angry, don't get angry. Again, so that shows within Islam, there's a means to prevent what the actual end product is. The end product, example, is when a person is angry, the amount of evil that can come from anger. So within this hadith, we know that we need to stay away from everything that will come close to that final result of being in a state of anger, where you act in a way that can be irrational and the likes. Of those things that is important to understand, when the Prophet ﷺ said, La taghdab, this consists of two matters. One, أن يكون مراده الأمر بالأسباب التي توجب حسن الخلق. فإن النفس إذا تخلقت بهذه الأخلاق وصارت لها عادة أوجب لها ذلك دفع الغضب عند حصول أسبابه. It can show the importance of beautifying yourself with good manners. Because when you have good manners, this aids you in preventing yourself becoming to this level of anger that the Prophet ﷺ is warning against here. So you don't become angry. Now, when you adorn yourself with good manners, these manners aid you in pushing away the anger. Pushing away the anger. As for a person who doesn't know Islamic manners and doesn't learn how to have the correct mannerisms as a Muslim, it's easy for them to make mistakes in their character and moral behavior. But if you beautify yourself, you learn, for example, from the manners, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him speak that which is good, or what? Stay silent. Now, staying silent in general, it benefits you. So imagine when you're angry, if you have learned to control yourself and not speak unless you speak goodness, when you're angry, you're more in need of that characteristic then. Because it's easy to say things that you will regret in a state of what? Anger. Also, what is meant by this? If you do reach a stage that you are angry, then do not act upon this anger, but rather strive in preventing this feeling to continue. And strive in removing this feeling from you, this emotion of anger. Remove it from yourself to the best of your ability. Because if a person, when they're in a state of anger, doesn't do any acting on what is going on in their mind at that time. When you're angry, imagine someone's just come and abuse you on the street and you get angry straight away. In that moment in time, many thoughts can come to your head. Punch him, do this, curse him back. But as a Muslim, you should try your best to control yourself in that situation and fight the emotion rather than the scenario. You fight the emotion that you have yourself. The emotion you have of anger, that's what you have to strive against. Because as we said, it is very easy to act upon anger and to act out of anger. And that's why those who are able to control themselves during times of anger, they are the ones who are most virtuous. They have more virtue and they're honored more. Because what is that factor that helps you not act upon anger? It's your fear of Allah. Knowing the evil that can be a result of what? Your anger. Sometimes as well, a person, for example, have a dispute with a spouse and then they divorce their spouse. They may be in a situation where they are in a state of anger where they do not know what they're saying at the time. Where this is where there's an excuse of anger. But unfortunately, you have those who try to make excuse and justify the actions and say that I was angry. Yet in the process, they made a phone call and said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm about to divorce my wife or whatever it is. They said they're going to do all of these things over the phone, had time to think about it. When it was going ring, ring, they were calm. They're listening to they're not in a state of, they had time to calm down. They had time to actually think about what they're going to do, what they're going to say. And they're talking to their friend, and then they go and get divorced and they say, no, it was out of anger. The state of anger where it becomes justifiable is when you're in such a state, as soon as you say it, you actually realize, oh my, I wasn't supposed to say that. There's immediate regret. You actually regret what you've done. And a similar situation, for example, someone gets you angry, you just slap them. And as soon as you slap them, you're like, subhanallah, I wasn't supposed to do that. I didn't want to do that. And that's when you're in a state of anger that is what is called uncontrollable anger. And these are the things that when you are conditioning yourself not to get angry, you're preventing yourself from ever reaching that stage. If you close the door to entering that stage, then you won't get to that stage. But it means you do not allow yourself to get that far. For example, someone is cursing you, someone's abusing you, don't respond. Because what happens when you respond, gradually you're going to what? Get angry and angry to the point you've had enough of the talking, let's go. That's what it leads to. So when you've been told don't get angry, it's not just don't be angry, don't get angry. Don't allow yourself to get to that stage. And there's a situation that came, النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يأمر من غضب بطاعات أسباب تدفع عنه الغضب وتسكنه. It mentions that the Prophet ﷺ used to command a person to take the means in dealing with their anger until it is removed from themselves, until they become in a state of calmness. And it came in a hadith في الصحيحين in both Bukhari and Muslim. عن سليمان ibn Surd قال استب رجلان عند النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ونحن عنده جلوس. That there were people that they were cursing each other in front of the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, two people. وأحدهما يسب صاحبه مغضبا, and the other one was cursing the other one in a state of anger. In a state of anger. قد احمر وجهه, and his face had become red. Because of the anger, the level of anger he was, his face changed color. But you see in his face that he'd become red out of the severity and how angry he was, the rage he had. But then the Prophet Muhammad he said, إني لأعلم كلمة لو قالها لذهب عنه ما يجد لو قال أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. The Prophet Muhammad then said, I know a phrase or some words. If he says it, what he is feeling will leave him. The anger he's feeling at the time, it will go away. And he said to say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, at a state of what? Anger. So then فقالوا للرجل, they said to the man, ألا تسمع ما يقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم? They said, do you not hear what the Prophet Muhammad has said? And he said, إني لست بمجنون. He said, I'm not mad. I'm not mentally ill. You see? But that was because he was still in a state of what? Anger. But that is what is authentically narrated. When you're in a state of anger, what should you say? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. That's the first thing you say. Now, as for the hadith in Musnad Imam Ahmed and Abu Dawood من حديث أبي ذر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا غضب أحدكم وهو قائم فليجلس. If one of you is angry and he's standing, then sit down. فإن ذهب عنه الغضب وإلا فليضطجع. But if the anger doesn't go away from him, then let him lie down. Here it mentions that this hadith is da'if. This is something we hear a lot, but the hadith is da'if, it's not authentic. The hadith is da'if. وضعفه شيخ الباني رحمة الله عليه في ضعيف الترغيب والترهيب. That this hadith is da'if. As for what is meant within this hadith though, taking those steps of, for example, if you're standing up, sit down, then lie down, you are removing yourself from the situation. So the meaning can be acted upon in terms of take yourself out of the situation. It may mean go for a walk, for example. Also, the hadith that mentions الغضب من الشيطان وإن الشيطان خلق من نار وإنما تطفأ النار بالماء فإذا غضب أحدكم فليتوضأ. The shaitan was created from anger is from shaitan. Shaitan is created from fire. And what puts out fire? Muhammad? Water. So if any of you becomes angry, let him go and make wudu. Hadith is da'if. The hadith is da'if. نعم. وضعفه الشيخ الباني وهو في سلسلة الضعيفة. نعم. Also, we have the other hadith that is in Sahihain and Abi Hurairah that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال ليس الشديد بالسرعة ليس الشديد بالسرعة إنما الشديد الذي يملك نفسه عند الغضب. Here it mentions the strong person is not the one who is good at wrestling. The strong person is not the one who is good at wrestling and is able to throw people over. No one can overpower him. He's strong. But this is not the strong person. Rather, the one who is strong, the one who can control his anger. The one who can control his anger. Being able to control yourself in a state of anger, this is true strength. Sometimes, when you act upon anger and you don't control yourself and you feel you have to show someone what you're about, this is actually pride. It's not strength. It's pride. Because you start to believe, if I don't do something, I'm going to be taken for someone who's weak. It shows weakness. If I don't do something, it's weakness. However, Islam teaches us, if you do not act upon anger and you're able to hold back yourself during that time, then this is true strength. Because the person who acts upon anger, they're not acting upon rational. They're acting upon emotion. And that will not bear any fruits of goodness. But the one who controls himself, this is the one who's in control of the situation. And this is important. Because when you're in a state of anger, it's like you are majnoon. ذهب العقل. Your rational has gone. And you will do things that sometimes, if someone tells you, you know what you did to that person, you won't even remember. The worst is when a person mixes this emotion with alcohol. We saw videos of what happened over the weekend with the people that were angry and drunk, what they were doing to people. Doesn't make sense. But if you ask that person the next day, do you know what you've done? Like, no. But then you show them a video, they'll be like, what? They may not be able to believe what they're seeing of how they were behaving. Because a person's acting upon an emotion that literally removes a person's rational. Yeah, this is in both Sahih Muslim and Bukhari. So the hadith is authentic. The one who is strong is the one who can control himself when he's in a state of anger. Also, something beneficial. The reality is I used to suffer anger management. Like, I used to be a very angry person. Sometimes it's trauma. Sometimes you don't know what causes you to be like this, where you can get really angry very fast. It's like, for me, there was no in between. But when you start to seek knowledge and you become a practiced Muslim, you have to learn to do something about it. You have to address it. So I remember I did an online anger management course by myself. I took myself, found the online anger management course, and I did it. And one thing that has stuck with me that is very beneficial, and it's not easy, but you should always try to do it, is separate you and your emotions. You know the difference between saying, I am angry and I'm feeling angry. People might think this is something basic. But if you say, I am angry, you are describing this is you. Whereas if you say, I am feeling this way, it's like you're giving a message that this is something temporary. This is how I'm feeling right now. And if you tell someone I'm feeling angry, they will also know not to fuel that fire. And you're able to now separate yourself from that emotion. This is how I'm feeling, but it's not who I am. Because then when you know this is not who you are, then you know you need to find yourself again. I.e., not act upon how you're not. This is not you. Anger is not you. That's how you're feeling right now. So separate yourself from that feeling and find yourself again. Taking those means, the first thing that we do is follow the advice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And you'll find that some of the things that we get angry over today, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never got angry over these things. For example, you ask someone to do something for you. They don't do it. They disappear for long. They come back hours later and they haven't done what you asked them to do. This happened at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that was when Anas ibn Malik, he said he served the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for how long? Who knows? How long did he serve the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? 10 years. Anas ibn Malik is one of the Sahaba that lived the longest. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to Medina, Anas ibn Malik couldn't wait to meet him. And this is just for today, Abu Islam. Islam, this is just for today. He couldn't wait to meet him. That's what all of the Sahaba couldn't wait to meet the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They've only heard about him, but what? They all believed. But you see, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to Medina, his mother said to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everyone's giving you gifts and stuff. I have nothing but my son here. And she offered her son Anas ibn Malik to serve the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that was the most beloved day to him in his whole life. The day that he met the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says the worst day of his life is the day that he departed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he served the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 10 years. So I said 10 years. And not once did he say, Lima fa'alt wa lima lam taf'al. Why did you do this? And why did you not do this? But this is something that is easy for us to what? Get angry over. But Muhammad is saying excuse for you. This ain't an excuse for you. We cannot intentionally not do what we've been told to do, especially by our parents, and then say, but the Prophet Muhammad SAW didn't get mad at Anas bin Malik. You see, we have to beautify ourselves with these, because Anas bin Malik was one of the most knowledgeable of the Sahaba. So in those times, spending such close time with the Prophet Muhammad SAW, what did he do? He learned the religion. Ulama of the Sahaba. So after the death of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, they would go to him for advice. He lived long, very long. It was said that they looked like the Prophet Muhammad SAW from the Tabi'een. And every time Anas bin Malik would see him, he would start to cry, because he really loved the Prophet Muhammad SAW. Like any of the Sahaba, they loved the Prophet Muhammad SAW. And imagine that. We learn about the characteristics of the Prophet Muhammad SAW from who? From the Sahaba, from the wives. And you will not hear anything but the best of characteristics. That's why Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentioned when she was su'ilat, Aisha radiallahu anha, an khulqin Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. She was asked about his manners, his character. فقالت كان خلقه القرآن. She said his manners was the Quran. I.e., all those manners that you're commanded with in the Quran, he had them. There was not one ayah that came down to him except that he had those manners. He acted upon it. That's why, what does Allah say? وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are on the most lofty, the best of manners. That's why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, إِنَّ أَقْرَبَكُم مِّنِّي مَجْلِسًا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Those who will sit closest to me on the day of judgment are who? أُحَاسِنُكُمْ خُلُقًا وَأَخْلَاقًا. The best of you in manners. The best of you in manners. You are the ones who are going to be closest to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those who have the best of manners. So when we are to look at following the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's not just how did he pray, how did he give zakah, how did he fast, and the likes. How was his manners? Why is it so important for us to look at the manners of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially as people who want to call to Islam? Why is it important for us? What does Allah say in the Quran? وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Had you been strong-hearted and harsh, the people would have fled away from you. You see? If you want to be someone who teaches and calls to Allah, you have to be gentle. You have to have good manners. These are the things that attract a person to you. People gravitate to people with what? Good manners, pleasant face, bashfulness, as they say. Nice character. But if you're someone who is harsh, nobody wants to be around you. They may see you from a distance and intentionally cross the road. I know you're looking for that Muslim just to turn their head so you can give salams. They're not turning their head. They're looking straight ahead. I need to escape this one. Why? Because they see you as harsh. And you may not even be going to say anything to them, but they are reminded of a feeling of belittlement. Just because they see you, they're reminded that you're just someone who's harsh. They start to feel inferior. But when you're someone who is kind, gentle, and you teach someone, you show them that you want good for them, this is what will bring them closer. And that's why Fir'aun was so evil. Because Allah didn't send Musa and Harun alayhim as-salam to him with harshness, even though he was deserving of it. They still went to him with gentleness. Allah said, say to him a kind word. قولا لينا لعله يتذكر أو يخشى. Who knows what the ayah is? فقولا له قولا لينا. It slipped me. It says, say to him a gentle word. You see, that maybe he would fear Allah, return to Allah, remember, But he didn't do this. He still had what? Pride, kibr. And that pride, it makes you not worship Allah. He said the worst of statements, that I am your Lord, worship me. He worship him. Despite this is the greatest dhulm a person can do, Allah said, say to him that which is kind. Speak to him in a way that is kind. So even the prophets and messengers have always exercised this hadith, not becoming angry. Even when it's like you feel like you had every right to be. But we shouldn't make excuse for us to have this emotion. Because as we mentioned, if a person allows himself to get so enraged, it can lead to a level of junun, where you lose rational. You're not able to contemplate and think about what you're doing. You act upon straight rage. And this is more dangerous. That's why the one who is strong is who? The one who controls their anger. It's more so in extreme anger, but at the same time, it's all anger. Because you may be angry of something, it won't get you to that level. But then you're angry. You may not be so angry, but because you're angry, something else might happen. And it piles up. Then something else happens with someone later, for example. Or when you go back home, one of your children, your wife said something to you. It went to yourself from getting angry or taking means to remove the anger. They become the one who receive all of the anger. So in general, you should always try to, within yourself, who's getting burnt? Yourself. You're only burning yourself. And sometimes you have to remind yourself, see when you're really angry and no one's around, who's the one who's actually hurting and suffering? You. No one else. So when the Prophet Muhammad told us, don't become angry, it's for our own benefit. You can become physically sick because of anger. Because you get yourself so enraged and you just store it. It will damage you. And you haven't done nothing to repel it. And for some people, they hold on to that feeling for days. They don't let it go. Either because they're stubborn, or either because they don't know how. They don't know how. But it's like a fire, it will burn you out until you've got nothing left, until you end up just sleeping. Because you've got nothing, you've not been able to exert that feeling. So the key thing is, how do we remove that feeling from ourselves? The first thing, when the Prophet Muhammad told us, say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. You don't just say it for the sake of saying it. You actually have to mean it. You mean it because it's a means of protection. It's a means of protection. That you're asking her to protect you from this emotion, from this feeling, and from the dangers that are associated with it. What can come about from it. Because there's situations where you see a person gets angry. Anger might be so enraged, but it only lasts 10 minutes. But in that 10 minutes, anger might be so enraged, but it only lasts 10 minutes. But in that 10 minutes, they may have acted upon the anger that results in regret for the rest of their life. In 10 minutes of enraged anger, you will act upon it and have regret for the rest of your life. Sometimes it leads to taking someone's life or attempting to take in a person's life where you have ruined yourself in this life and in the hereafter. So that's the evils of anger is what a person is to be conscious of. And if you know yourself that you're angry or it's easy for you to get angry, you have to do something about it. Anger management is something that you may have to do. And we can't have pride and say, no, I can't go to, what do they call those people, shrinks and stuff. Don't have this mentality. No, you go and you seek help for your own benefit. And you'll be upon goodness in doing so. You will feel better about yourself because you're doing it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So we have to swallow pride. And sometimes living in the West, Some of us have been exposed to some lifestyles where you are constantly surrounded by anger, either from yourself or angry people around you. So it's about how do we deal with that emotion, that we do not become of those who act upon anger. Also, it's mentioned that in a hadith in Musnad Imam Ahmad, one Nisa'i, and Shaykh Albani, he said this Sahih, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to say in his dua, "As'aluka kalimat al-haq fil ghadabi wal rida." He used to ask Allah to guide him to say the truth when he's angry and when he's pleased and when he's happy, in both times. To ask Allah for that guidance, that I only speak the truth when I'm angry and when I'm happy. And when we see the dua that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to make, these are the supplications we should learn and try to implement. Even if you don't think you're angry or become angry, you say it anyway, so that when that time comes, you've asked Allah for this guidance, that you're not tested with this. Because sometimes there's a situation, people have dispute, and it becomes heated, and you don't defend the truth. You defend personal ties, relationships, because you're angry. But if you was of those who had this control where I say, no matter what the situation, I'll speak the truth. Even if it's against your own self. You're not going to defend falsehood when you're angry. So this is of the things that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had taught us, not to be of those who become angry, and to always speak the truth, whether you're angry or whether you're pleased, happy. No. أسألك كلمة الحق أسألك كلمة الحق في الغضب والرضا. I ask you, Allah, to speak the truth, for words of truth in times of anger and pleasure. أسألك كلمة الحق في الغضب والرضا. The next hadith is hadith number 17. عن أبي يعلى شداد ابن أوس رضي الله عنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إن الله كتب الإحسان على كل شيء، فإذا قتلتم فأحسنوا القتلة، وإذا ذبحتم فأحسنوا الذبح، وليحد أحدكم شفرته وليرح ذبيحته. رواه Muslim. In this hadith, in the English copy of 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, it will mention that Allah has commanded to slaughter in the best manner. Amr bil-ihsan al-dhibh or al-dhabh. That Allah has commanded a person to slaughter in the best manner, i.e., when it comes to slaughtering in the best manner, within this hadith, it mentions Allah has written and He prescribed excellence in everything. No matter what the Muslim does, you should do it in the best way. The things that you have been commanded to do, you should always do it in the best way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala katab al-ihsan fi kulli shay, ala kulli shay. And it mentions فَإِذَا قَتَلْتُمْ. So if you have to kill, then kill in the best manner. What does it mean when it says kill in the best manner? Don't remove limbs, sever limbs, and the likes. Don't do these things. These are the ways of the kuffar. You kill in the best way. There's a time when killing is not fast, but it's not too slow. Islamically, in a land that implements the Sharia, when is this? And who knows why? Stoning for zina. You don't get large stones that it makes it quick, nor do you get tiny pebbles that makes it really slow. You get that which is in between. Why?
Because you don't want it to be like with small stones, it's like a torture.
It's like a torture.
And if it's with a big stone,
It's too fast.
Yeah.
Because they say every part of the body is involved in zina. And that's why you don't just stone one part of the body. They are stoned everywhere. The stone hits them everywhere. Because every part of your body is involved in zina. The feelings is in every part of your body. This is why stoning has been prescribed with a stone that is in between, that is medium size. Pardon? They stone your head. They stone everywhere.
I think what he's referring to is when someone just has their head and they stone it, just up to their head, and they stone the head rather than the whole body.
No, they stone the whole body. The whole body is to be stoned.
So just doing the head is the wrong manner in which to
Yeah, it should be stoned everywhere. Sheikh Uthaymeen speaks about it. They're supposed to fit in every part of their body. Pardon? You have to sleep outside. No, when you're killing a person in zina, this is done by those of authority, but it's done publicly. The people who know how to do it, like the people of Qadha, they know how to do it. They will establish it, but they're stoned publicly in front of everyone. They're stoned publicly. But that's why I said the reason why it's medium stones, their whole body is to feel it. The whole body is to feel it.
Would that be for to deter anybody else who's watching it?
Yeah,
from
from the sin.
So is it humiliation upon the one who is receiving it?
Exactly.
In front of everyone?
100%. The qada, like severing of the hand, all of these things are done publicly. Not just anywhere. There's a place that they have that is done. It's done publicly. People who want to go and watch, they go and watch. It's not an obligation to go and watch, but it's a deterrent. That's why you find in Islam, your hand is severed for stealing. You're stoned for committing zina if you're thayyib az-zani. You're an adulterer, you're married and committing zina. Okay? Now, if you know this is going to happen, how many people is going to do it? In Islam, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how many people got stoned and had their hand severed? It wasn't 100. You can count them. You see? But now here, for example, in this country, how many people are taking life of people unjustly without fear of any punishment? Because there's no deterrent. If you knew, for example, you took someone's life unjustly, your life is going to be taken. A qisas, a life is for a life. Less people are going to want to take life. That's why the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the best interest of mankind. Is in the best interest of mankind. And it's not easy. You can't just say, okay, one person saw you steal, khalas, your hand's gone. There's 4 upright witnesses. It can't be anyone as well. If you're a liar, you can't witness. If you get accused of lying and you're proved to lie once, you can never be a witness. Islam is just. So when Islam is just. So when a person is caught for doing something, look at the fear of the Sahaba. They would come to the Prophet Muhammad and say, I deserve punishment. Let alone today, people do what they want. One came to the Prophet Muhammad because he kissed a woman. And he said, Inni asabtu al-hadd fa'aqimhu alayhi. He said, I am deserving of the punishment, so carry it out upon me. This was before Salah. He kept saying it. The Iqamah was called. And then they prayed. After Salah, he went straight back to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, repeating the same thing. I am deserving of punishment. Punish me. And then that's when it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because he had witnessed the Salah, he had perfected his wudu, witnessed the Salah, Allah had forgiven him. But now, people hiding, doing what they want. But there's no deterrent. There's no deterrent from sin. People are killing people and saying, boy, it was self-defense, khalas. And they're lying many times. They're all fighting each other unjustly. The younger people especially. But then they go jail 10 years, 12 years, they come out. But if you know, if I kill someone unjustly, without due right, due cause, and we as public, general people, we're not allowed to do it anyway, I know my life is going to be taken. I'm going to think twice. Not twice, 5 times, 10 times. Sleepless nights if I'm going to do the action. You see? Now,
So in the Prophet's time, was it kill for kill?
not just anyone though. If you killed someone unjustly, then you will be put to punishment by the people of Qada, the judges. At the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the judge. You see? These laws are not to be carried out by general people. And that's why the people of Takfir went to extremes, because they carried out themselves. People of misguidance, they thought, I have the right to carry out the laws of Allah. There are people that are prescribed to do these things, to carry out these roles. I remember, I don't know if you have ever seen it, one of the people that are entrusted with establishing, carrying out the rules, the Sharia in Saudi, I think he's one of the people that he shows you his sword. And he tells you, and the thing is, they even if it was their cousin, there's no emotion involved. This is not it's not about emotion. These people, they truly fear Allah. They know, I'm doing this because this is the law of Allah. And that's it. And it's to be done in justice. In justice. And the thing is, if you know, that's why I said at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, there's very few incidents that we know of where the punishment of stoning or hands being severed is known. Very few times it happened. Very few times it happened. That's because it's a deterrent. When the people know the punishment that they receive for doing something, they will think twice. They will think twice. And not only did the Prophet Muhammad say in this hadith, if you have to kill, then you do it in the best way. Even in the battle, if you have to kill in battle, you do it in the best way. You do it in the best way. You don't just sever limbs and the likes. You don't do these things. And I think it's called a tamthil. You don't do this when you take people's nose off and the likes. These things are to be avoided. But these are the things that the kuffar were doing. And these are the kind of ways that's the things that they would do. Fir'aun would do this. Take off all your limbs. This was of the ways that he would crucify you. This was not a punishment that was just only known to the Romans. It was a punishment known over generations. They would do this and they will sever your limbs. This was how they would punish people. But Islam forbade this. You do it in the best way. And the same is to be applied when you're slaughtering. In the Arabic language, it says qitla and dhibha. This pattern is called ismul hay'a. It means the way that something is done. So it says, فَإِذَا ذَبَحْتُمْ فَأَحْسِنُوا الذِّبْحَ. If you are to slaughter, then you do it in the best way. Meaning, as it explained in the hadith, to make sure your knife is sharp. To make sure your knife is sharp. Why? So the animal is spared of suffering. So those who talk about animal rights and the likes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the animals for a reason. Riding beasts or for food. And other benefits, for traveling and the likes. Even if you're traveling, you cannot overload the animal that you're using, whether it's the camel, the horse, the donkey. You cannot overload it till it becomes torture. You're not allowed to do this. But when you are slaughtering as well, the animal should be put to rest, not to be put through suffering. To the point you even hide the blade. You do not slaughter in front of another one. All of these things are to be avoided. You are to slaughter in the best way. Now, we have what Islam tells us to do. People doing other than this does not determine Islam. It doesn't define Islam. It defines that person's issue. That represents that person's character or lack of knowledge, ignorance. But as for what Islam tells us to do, this is what we have to teach the people. Islam tells you if you are going to slaughter, you have to do it in the best way. You have to do it in the best way. And this is what Allah has commanded us to do. Al-ihsan fi kulli shay. And that's why we mentioned in another hadith when it says, Inna Allah tayyib la yaqbalu illa tayyiba. Allah is pure and does not accept anything except that is what? Pure. The best of actions. And how do we make our actions pure? Bil ikhlas wa ittiba' an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If you want your action to be pure, it has to be done only for Allah and following the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Also, we have in a hadith that Shaykh Al-Bani rahimahullah says is authentic in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and it says, وَالشَّاتُ إِنْ رَحِمْتَهَا رَحِمَكَ اللَّهُ. The sheep, if you show it mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you mercy. This is the sheep. If you show the sheep mercy, when? At the time of slaughtering. You're merciful. i.e. you follow the Sharia. You make sure the blade is sharp. That you save the animal from suffering. This is you being merciful. You can't just say, it's not that sharp, but I need to do it. I'm just going to do it anyway. If it's not sharp, sharpen the blade. And you're doing this, why? Because Allah has commanded you to slaughter in the best way. And that you make sure the animal does not suffer. Now, if you show this mercy to the animal from the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah will show you mercy. Allah will show you mercy. And there is nothing better than receiving mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. To receive the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a fadl, a bounty that is unmeasurable. Because Allah's mercy, wasi'at kulla shay, is more vast than anything. When Allah shows mercy upon you, this is within all aspects of your life. When Allah shows mercy upon you, this includes forgiveness of your sins, your transgressions. So it's important that we follow these advices of moral conduct that teaches the Muslim to act in the best way. The Muslim is to adorn themselves with the best of manners. It's very important to have good manners. And that's why even in the Quran, in Surah Al-Luqman, the advice that Allah teaches us from a father to a son, a lot of the advice includes manners. Manners with Allah Azza wa Jal, manners with your parents, manners with other people of the creation, manners in your acts of worship. That manners is a very important part of Islam that is not to be neglected. Why Imam al-Bukhari, as we know his Sahih, he also authored Al-Adab al-Mufrad, a collection of hadith that talk about the manners of the Muslim with your parents, truthfulness, any hifd al-amana, preserving trusts that you've been entrusted with, fulfilling contracts. All of this is from what? Manners of the Muslim. And that's why whatever we are doing and we are involved in, Allah has commanded us to do it in the best of ways. To do it in the best of ways. And inshallah ta'ala, we will stop with that today and we'll continue from Hadith 18 in the coming lessons, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.